Brightwater Bay glittered under a white-gold sun waves licked the quay, like curious cat ships lined the harbor. Dressed in signal flags on the outer wall stood the Avatar Lady. Serenia skin tinted a deep sky blue with swirling silver patterns, braids wrapped in beads of glass and coral eyes that mirrored the sea's horizon armor, shaped like a sculpted crest of dawn. Her hand rested on the hilt of a curved tide blade. From the coastal road came a figure heavy with shadow. Kale the Gladiator walked with a stride made for Arena's bronzed skin, cross-hatched with dueling scars, black hair bound high for heat and clarity. A half-cape the color of crimson storms and a two-handed war cleaver strapped to his back. Crowds parted sensing stories. In their proximity, Serenia watched him with calm assessment. The gulls wheeled lower, as if to overhear. They met where stone met sunlit foam. Her voice carried like tide over smooth rock. "Your name is known inland," she said simply. Kyle grinned without humor, his eyes scanning the horizon, "and yours on waters far beyond Brightwater." Between them, the bay swelled with something unspoken. Vendors paused mid-call and listened to silence. The air tasted faintly of incoming metal. Somewhere deep, a horn's note rolled into daylight. An alarm bell shattered the calm in 3 strikes from beyond the headland. Rose sails, black as basalt engines, growled like distant quarry beasts. Serenia's tide blade sang as it left its scabbard. Kale reached for his cleaver and found its weight perfect. A column of smoke rose inland from an earlier raid. Fishers scrambled to pull boats under the seawall. The market crowd dissolved into practiced evacuation above them. The sun glared at the approaching threat. The first enemy cutters skimmed the surf with cruel efficiency. Hulls plated in riveted iron, chased by spray. Their crews armored in segmented chrome leather, each bearing the emblem of a serrated wave. Serenia stepped onto the wave-break arch salt wind. Pulled at her braids and cape, Kyle joined her boots planting on wet stone. His shadow fell long across the rising tide. Together, they studied the formation like a puzzle. "They'll aim for the dry dock first," Serenia noted. Kyle nodded, eyes narrowing. To measure range, she raised her palm and the tide surged unnaturally, a cresting wall of water shoving at the lead cutter. Kale leapt down onto the key meeting boarding hooks with steel. His cleaver roared through a line of enemy pole arms. Fishers turned militia, took courage from his momentum. Serenia's voice carried orders across the foam, and the sun poured light on every flash of blade. The cutters tried to pivot away from the wave break, but Serenia's power bent currents like pliant rope. Kale seized a fallen boarding plank and hurled it, splintering the helm of a second ship into fragments. Enemy crossbows answered with a storm of bolts. Serenia spun her tide blade, deflecting the lethal rain. Kale's armor rang but held its promise. 2 foes lunged and met the Gladiator's decisive edge. Gulls screamed approval above the chaos. The first cutter grounded itself on the reef. Kyle vaulted aboard through a haze of salt. The deck became a theater of close violence. Serenia's tide surged. Again, snapping lines, crew fell into the shallows where militia seized them. A horn on shore signaled reinforcements arriving. Kale threw the last opponent overboard. Serenia joined him, both blades dripping seawater. The bay's heart beat faster in the midday glare. From the headland, more black-sailed ships approached, larger hulls bristling with ballistae and deck-mounted claws. The harbor master shouted for the inner gates to close. Kyle and Serenia sprinted along the seawall to intercept. Civilians vanished into the fortified plaza. Fishmongers threw spears instead of sales pitches. Tideward watchtowers unfurled signal flags for inland help. But the nearest garrison was hours away. The defenders would stand or Brightwater would burn. Serenia leapt from the wall into waist-deep surf, her tide blade carved arcs that pulled breakers higher. Kyle remained on the stone platform, swinging his cleaver ballista bolt smashed into the quay, showering grit. One struck inches from his stance, but he didn't flinch. Serenya's wave slammed into the first of the larger hulls. Kale timed a leap to the boarding claw mid-swing, cleaving it free before it anchored. The enemy reeled from the loss of momentum. Onshore carpenters repurposed timbers into barricades. Net makers strung weighted mesh across the slipways. Children carried water to fighters without being told. Kale barked orders between hewing through another gangplank. Serenya sent a whirlpool under the second hull. Its deck tilted, sending crew-skidding militia arrows found unarmored targets. Enemy drums beat harder under a cloudless sky, but the sun still favored the coast defenders. A third hull managed to hook the wall. Kale ran its length, cutting lines as he went. 3 foes tried to pin him at the forecastle. Serenya rose behind them, riding a wall of water. Her blade flashed as bright as noon reflection. Kale drove forward, hammering his cleaver down. Deck boards cracked and rang like split bells. The attackers fell back. Stunned, Brightwater still stood, though the tide smelled of iron smoke from the inland raid thickened over the hills. Messengers on horseback burst through the east gate, reporting a pincer plan to trap the defenders. Serenya's jaw tightened, and her eyes flared silver. Kale rolled his shoulders, feeling the ache settle in the harbor. Master pointed to a narrow causeway south. Cut them there before they spill into the bay. Serenya and Kale didn't hesitate. The crowd cleared a path as they ran under full sun. The causeway was a stone ribbon over tidal pools. Enemy raiders in leather and chrome crept across, shields interlocked and spears raised. Serenya sprinted ahead, using the tide to propel her. Kale followed in long, powerful strides. Her blade struck first, opening the shield wall like cloth. Kale crashed in behind, breaking spears with his cleaver. Salt spray blinded the raiders mid-formation, and the coastal wind stole their battle shouts. They fought not just to kill, but to unseat momentum. Serenya spun into the gap, scattering foes. Kale's strikes landed with the weight of stadium roars. A spear tip grazed her armor, sparking against enchantment. His cleaver sheared it away before the thrust renewed her tide blade, found the wielder's gauntlet, and ended it in the pools below. Crabs scuttled away from falling bodies. The causeway stones ran red and steaming overhead. Gulls traced wide circles of witness. Mid-battle, a horn blew from the headland again. More sails. On the horizon, glinting black. Kale spat into the tide and grinned. Feral Serenya glanced at the sun, gauging its angle. "We have hours until shadow reaches the bay." He nodded, understanding her unspoken plan. "Then we break them before the light bends." The causeway fight tapered into retreat. The defenders turned back toward Brightwater with urgency. Back at the harbor, the militia regrouped. Serenya stood at the center, giving clear, rapid orders. Kyle checked the barricades for weak spots. Vendors turned wagons into movable shields. Fishers dipped harpoons in pitch for fire. Casting the reef mouth became a planned choke point above the market balconies. Archers took their perches on the outer wall. The black-sailed ships drew closer. The sun's heat made the steel of their prows shimmer. Kale climbed to the highest tower for vantage through the spyglass. He counted 5 heavy hulls and a dozen smaller outriders fanning wide. He memorized their approach paths and descent angles. Serenya joined, him scanning the sea for current shifts. Her fingers tapped the spyglass rhythmically, mapping where her power could turn the tide. They descended together into the organized chaos. Each step matched the drum of the incoming fleet ballista crews. Loaded quarrels as long as masts. Kale hefted one himself, setting it in place. The winch groaned under his strength alone. Serenya marked targets in chalk on the battlement aunties from the plaza, brought water skins. Children carried messages between. Wall and dock, the first heavy hull crossed the reef line. Serenya shouted the signal. Kyle loosed the quarrel into the enemy. Bowet struck deep, splitting the plating and slowing the advance. Flames licked from the wound as pitch met fire arrow. Outriders tried to flank, but nets blocked the slipways. Serenya pulled currents inward, dragging them off course. Kale roared and vaulted down to meet the first boarding line. His cleaver swept wide, clearing 3 foes in one motion. Militia pressed forward. Behind his lead, the sun glared down as though to blind the enemy's aim. Brightwater's defenders did not yield an inch. A siege ladder clattered against the east wall. Cale was there before the first boot landed. One stroke sent ladder and climbers. Tumbling, Serenia conjured a surge to smash another ladder aside. The enemy adapted firing hooks into the parapet. Archers cut lines even as more were thrown. Cale caught a hook rope and yanked hard. An armored raider crashed into the wall base. The gulls screamed their jeers at every failed climb. On the quay, 2 outriders landed fighters. Serenia met them waist-deep in the shallows. Her tide blade whirled. A circle of foaming defense steel rang against water-forged edge. Cale leapt from the wall. To her side, his cleaver dropped like a falling gate. The raiders staggered under the 2 front assault militia poured into the gap, driving them back. Waves carried the wounded out to reef capture. From the flagship, a drumbeat thundered, and massive harpoons were loaded into prow launchers. Serenia spotted the aim toward the central quay. She dove under the surface, pulling the tide with her Kyle sprinted across the dock in great lunges. The harpoon loosed, then met a wall of sudden swell. It veered off, burying itself in empty water. A cheer rose from the defenders. The sun glinted on spray like gold leaf. The flagship captain bellowed for renewed assault. Cale pointed his cleaver toward the enemy deck. Serenia surfaced beside him, breathing steady. "They will keep trying until one of us takes that ship." He grinned, ready for the leap. "I'll make the climb. You turn the sea against their rudder." She nodded, and the plan was born. The next wave crashed louder than before. Brightwater's walls shook with defiance. Not fear, Cale boarded the flagship through smoke and chaos, clambering up a net meant for anchors, not men. Serenia's manipulation of the current spun the hull enemy. Crew stumbled, struggling to adjust aim on deck. Cale became a storm of bronze and steel. His cleaver split shields like thin bark. Opponents fell away. In bruised waves, he drove toward the mast, where the captain stood. Their blades met in a clang, felt through the planks. The captain was taller but slower. Kyle used the ship's roll to throw off his stance. One pivot brought the cleaver down across the captain's guard. A shout, and the weapon spun away into the sea below. The water foamed. With Serenia's turning tide, outriders smashed against one another, unable to steer. Cale raised the captain by the collar and hurled him aside. The crew hesitated, seeing their leader fall. Then a horn from shore signaled retreat to the bay. Serenia guided the flagship toward a grounding on the reef. Cale leapt back to the quay as lines were thrown. Militia boarded to secure prisoners. The remaining black sails began to break formation. Archers picked at their masts, slowing escape the harbor. Master shouted orders to chain the gates. The sun stood high over the water's glitter, and Brightwater drew a long breath. Not all raiders retreated. 3 hulls lingered their decks, now bristling with armored siege beasts, massive reptilian creatures. Inflated barding catapults mounted on their spines. Serenia's eyes widened at the rarity. Cale flexed his grip. Knowing these would push the line, antes hurried civilians deeper into the plaza. Militia shifted to spear and harpoon ranks. The sun bore down on scales and steel alike. The first beast waded into the shallows, hurling boulders. Cale charged along the quay, using bollards for cover. Serenia climbed the wall to send a wave sideways. It struck the beast's flank, staggering its aim. Cale reached the creature's shoulder and swung down the cleaver bit between armor plates, drawing a roar. Militia spears stabbed upward, finding soft joinings. The beast crashed into the water, pulling handlers down. Foam closed over the struggle, as the tide claimed them. The second beast tried the opposite flank. Serenia descended to meet it at waterline. Her tide blade drew a gleaming slash across its snout. It reared, opening a gap in its neck. Guard archers on the balconies took the shot. Cale sprinted across the quay to finish the job. His cleaver landed with a crack like splitting stone. The beast fell sideways into the surf. The harbor swelled to wash it toward the reef. The last beast advanced under heavy cover enemy crossbows. Suppressing the defenders, Serenia ducked under a railing, sliding into the water. Kyle signaled for nets from the armory fishers and militia, cast in unison, tangling its legs. Serenia rose behind it, riding a crest taller than the key she brought. The tide blade down into the exposed spine. The beast collapsed, shaking the dock. Brightwater roared as the sun poured gold over victory. With the beasts defeated, the enemy began full withdrawal. Serenia called for repair crews immediately. Kale oversaw. Reinforcement of damaged gates vendors returned with carts now loaded with planks. Children carried nails and pitch to where they were needed. Aunties walked the walls offering water to fighters. The reef glistened with debris from grounded ships. Archers kept aim on the shrinking black sails. The sun began its slow lean westward. Messengers reported the inland fires were out. Raiders had abandoned their push from that direction. Brightwater's militia cheered and allowed a brief rest. Serenia sheathed her tide blade for the first time all day. Kyle leaned against a piling, rolling his shoulders. The harbor master updated casualty and repair lists. Gulls returned to their usual squabbling over scraps. Market stalls began setting out goods. Again, the air smelled of salt pitch and grilled fish. But the day wasn't done. Distant sails still moved, not black this time, but a pale steel blue. Serenia recognized the crest of the Coast Alliance. Kale raised an eyebrow at her change in stance. "Reinforcements or questions?" he asked. "Both," she answered. Knowing their politics, the Alliance ships moved in disciplined formation. Militia stood ready, unsure of their orders. The sun lit every wave between harbor and newcomers. Brightwater prepared for diplomacy in full armor. The Alliance flagship anchored just outside the reef. A delegation rode in under banners. Serenia met them at the sea steps, Kale at her side. Their leader spoke of treaties and shared defense, but also hinted at taking control for stability. Kale's grip tightened on the cleaver's hilt. Serenia's expression remained calm, but unyielding. "Brightwater stood today without your orders," she said. The gulls cried overhead like applause. Negotiations moved to the market square. Aunties served tea as tradition demanded alliance. Scribes took notes while eyeing the walls. Kyle stood at Serenia's shoulder. Silent and solid, she spoke of mutual aid without surrender of command. The crowd listened their loyalty. Unshaken scribes exchanged looks as her points stacked. Kyle's mere presence kept the tone respectful. The sun shone between clouds like a seal of approval. By midday, the delegation softened, offering supplies and shipwright crews in return for open harbor and mutual patrols. Serenia agreed with conditions signed in public. Kale signed as witness for the defenders. A cheer rose when the final mark was inked. The Alliance officers bowed and withdrew. Sails turned seaward under cooperative. Watch Brightwater kept both its pride and its allies. Repairs began in earnest under full daylight. Shipwrights from both Brightwater and the Alliance worked side by side on cracked hulls and scorched beams. Kale took to training new recruits between tasks. Serenia walked the seawall with the harbor master, marking places for stronger defenses and faster signals. Vendors offered food free to those on shift. Children carried buckets of paint for signal patterns. Gulls perched watching the city stitch itself stronger. The grounded flagship was stripped of weapons, its hull repurposed for floating breakwaters. Kale personally oversaw moving the ballistae to the walls. Serenia tuned tide stones to better channel currents. Militia rotated through. Rest and repair in shifts, the market regained its usual rhythm by late afternoon. Tourists even began returning to see the famed defenders. Kale laughed with a group of carpenters over shared ale. The sun cast long spears of light through rigging that. Evening drums beat not for war but celebration. Serenia spoke briefly, thanking all who stood the line. Kale raised a toast to those who never set down tools. The Alliance captain saluted them from the key lanterns, lit the market in warm gold. The reef glowed softly under the last light waves, lapped gently as if in applause. Brightwater's heart beat steady into the night, and the day's heat eased into a salt-sweet breeze. Morning broke with gulls wheeling above calm seas. Serenia stood. On the seawall tide blade at rest, Kyle joined her carrying 2 mugs of strong tea below them. The harbor bustled without urgency. Sails of many colors dotted the bright horizon. Vendors set up stalls as if yesterday was just another story. Children laughed in the shallows. Chasing small fish alliance patrols moved in friendly arcs outside the reef. The sun climbed without a hint of shadowed threat. They spoke quietly about the cost of holding a city Kale admitted he'd fought for coin more than cause before Serenia said the sea taught her to value the shore's keepers together. They watched the repaired gates swing open, ships moved through with confidence and grace, the market bells rang for the day's first catch, and the tide moved in time with their heartbeat. Brightwater was whole and awake under the sky, its defenders ready for whatever daylight brought next.